Well, Black Sheep had two albums on Capitol Records, and before we got signed to Capitol Records, though, I was the drummer and the singer, and we were writing original songs. It was very difficult to put the theme of the song across to the audience when you're behind a big set of drums. They can't even see your face, you know. And so we had a meeting and we said either we need a drummer or a singer. And we tried to get singers. We auditioned a bunch of them, and they just didn't. They didn't work out. A lot of them didn't want to write original. Didn't want to do original material. They wanted to play the top 40 hits and make some money. You know. And so I volunteered to get off the drums and be the singer, and we found a real good drummer. And we were supposed to be opening Kiss's special guest for a whole tour. And our first show with them was in Boston Academy of Music, and we got a standing ovation. We didn't know what to do with that. We looked around and we saw Kiss's tour manager, and he says, "Yeah, go ahead, play another song." You know, so we did, and that was so great. And then we went out and listened to them, and they were terrific. And then we drove home, and about 3 hours behind us was our crew with the truck and the equipment. I got home, I went to bed, and all of a sudden I got a phone call from one of the crew guys. He says, "Can you come and get us?" I says, "Dear God, what do you mean?" He says, "We hit a patch of ice on the New York State Thruway. The truck slid off the road and tipped over." I says, "Are you guys all right?" He says, "We've got some bumps and bruises, but we're okay. Thing is, we can't get the door open to see how the equipment made it." So a big wrecker took the truck off an exit and put it in a gas station in a little town, you know. And so me and the bass player went back and picked up the crew. Even though we couldn't check out the equipment, we picked up the crew and brought them back to Rochester because that day coming up was Christmas.
Oh,
Yeah, the show we played was on Christmas Eve. So we wanted to make sure they were home with their families for
correct.
Christmas at
Yeah.
least. We weren't going to leave them stranded out there. And the next day after Christmas, two or three of us got in our band station wagon and drove back to the place where the truck was. And the guys in the gas station managed to jimmy rig the door up. And we all wanted to throw up. It was such a mess in there. The Hammond organ, the legs were ripped off. The Marshall amps right through the hard shell cases, destroyed the speakers and the electronics, and even the drums. They were in hard shell cases too, but the cases were cracked and broken, and some of the drums had rolled out, and they were not round anymore. They were oblong. And we finally got our insurance company to come and inspect the damages, and they reckoned 80 to 85% of the equipment was destroyed, not fixable. So the next thing I had to do right away, this is the day after Christmas, we did all this. I had to call 10 years after tour manager, and oh, sorry, Kiss's tour manager, not 10, Kiss, because we were touring with Kiss. I had to call Kiss's tour manager and let them know that we wouldn't be able to do the rest of the tour with them as much as we wanted to. And he says, "Why don't you, they were on Capitol Records too." He says, "Why don't you call Capitol and tell them what happened?" He says, you guys got a new album out in Capitol. You're touring to promote the
Mhm.
album. That's money for them too. Have them front you some money against the album sales." And I says, "That's a good idea." I says, "I'm going to call them right now." So I called Capitol, and I'm not sure who I spoke to, but it was somebody in the hierarchy, and they said they would talk to a few other people and call me back. The next day they called me back and they said, "We decided we're not going to do that, and we're giving you your release."
Wow.
How do you like that? Nothing we did, just fate. But with all the money they had, they couldn't afford to get us some used equipment and a small used truck and put us back on the road again. to make us and them some money because the guys in Kiss and the crew loved us, you know.
Yeah.
And it would have been a really good bill had we finished that tour. And that was the end of Black Sheep.
What a
And
shame.
about 6 months later, Mick Jones called. He somehow called my father's number, my father and mother's number, and asked for me. And my dad called me uh, in my apartment and said, "This guy Mick Jones wants to talk to you." I says, "Mick Jones." He says, "Yeah, I don't know who it is." He says, "Mick Jones. He's got an English accent. He's from New York." He says he wants to talk to you. So I called him back, and he told me he wasn't with Spooky Tooth anymore. That he was putting his own band together, and he happened to hear one of the Black Sheep albums and liked the way I sang, and asked me if I would. He said, "Would you come down if we fly you down and put you up in a hotel? Would you come down and audition?" And I says, "Well, I would like to, Mick." I says, "But I have to finish up business with Black Sheep. You know, we've got to figure out if we're going to try to continue or that's it." And he says, "Well," he says, "I'll call you back in a couple of weeks." I says, "Okay, good." So the next time the guys in Black Sheep and I got together, we get together once or twice a week just to see if we could do anything or, you know.
Yeah.
And so I told them about the call, and they said, "Well, what did you tell them?" I said I told them that I wouldn't come down because I'm already in a band, you know. And they said, "Lou, you know, we sit here and we talk about what if and what if." They said, "We all sit here and we know that this band is over. You've got an opportunity to do something and maybe something really great." He said, why don't you take him up on his offer and go see what you can do in New York?"
Fantastic, and very magnanimous from the rest of your bandmates as well to allow that to happen. So, just in terms of meeting up with Mick and the rest of the band, then what were your first impressions of him and playing with him and the rest of the band? What was your feeling immediately from doing that?
Well, I like them. They're all very friendly guys, and you could tell that there's a lot of camaraderie between them. Now, uh, Foreigner, as we know it, wasn't completely together yet. Uh, Dennis wasn't in the band, uh, um, and there was a different bass player too. Uh, um, so when we started writing, Mick and I started writing the day I auditioned. He told me he liked the way I sang and stuff, and he says, "You want to come over for supper tonight?" He says, "Let's start writing some songs." So I went over his house. We wrote that night. The first night we got together, we wrote "Long, Long Way from Home."
Oh, wow.
Yep, that's a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah, very good.